Wait for the. Yeah, we're live. Hello.
Yay.
Hi, and welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour, the weekly live stream brought to you by Effective Artistry. My name is Marie. I'm an executive functioning coach with Effective Artistry, and I'm joined, as always, by Caitlin Miller and Brandon Tessers, who are therapists with Effective Artistry, which is a neurodiversity affirming therapy practice based in Northbrook, Illinois. Hello, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Welcome.
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, it's good to be with you both. It feels like no time since the last one. I don't know where the week has gone.
Yeah.
How have you been?
Pretty good. Yeah, and yes, time's going fast. That's not new for me. Time's always going super fast.
We're already getting into wizardry. This is like so fast.
Yay!
Yeah, time went fast for me too. Yeah. But I had some nice memories. And I felt inspired by the stream last week, so I applied some of it, even though I can't track it if Brandon says, "What did you apply?" to my creative practices.
Yay! That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And guess what? It makes better art. I'm so surprised. And by better, I mean more joyful.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great.
Super shocked.
So if you're joining us today, last week we talked about the creative process and how to deal with blocks or the anxiety that comes with putting your work out there, putting yourself out there in front of an audience, which we're doing right now, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Hello world. If you're new to the stream, the title of the show is This Is Not Therapy, but it is a chance for you to have a conversation with two therapists. So if you've got any questions, we talk about neurodiversity, creativity, well-being, mental health. So if you've got questions or ideas you'd like us to discuss, feel free to pop a message in the chat. I'll read them out to Brandon and Caitlin, and we'll take it from there. Um, what else? It's just be mindful of what you're putting in the chat, that it's going to be under your own name. So just be careful if you're sharing personal information. That's it, I think.
Yeah, we can work with, currently we can work with therapy clients in the state of Illinois, and we can help with the matching process as well as like looking through our website at the bios and contacting therapists specifically. And then also our lovely coaches, including Marie Moran, who I am looking at your face, can work with people anywhere where there is an internet connection.
Thank you. I forgot that bit. That bit's important. And you can find us at effectiveartistry.com. So what's been on your mind since last week? You want to talk a bit more about the creative process?
I'm transfixed by a mask I'm making, a ceramics mask. It's bringing me so much joy.
Tell us about it.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about it is essentially I have like the skin face part, and then like the eyes and nose, eyebrows, and lips, just like general. So I went into the pottery class just, very general looking. And then I just started doing it, and it turned into this like devil deer woman antler, like snakes. Like I was like, wow. And I love it. And it reminds me of composing music where like, I don't know exactly what words to put around this. And I'd love for your feedback, Brandon. Like when there's not an intention and you just kind of do something, and if you like it, you get rid of it. If you like it, you keep it. If you don't like it, you get rid of it, and then you just keep going. You seem more serious.
I do?
Yeah. What are you thinking, Brandon?
I was listening to you.
Okay.
I was thinking about the thing that you asked about how, what language to apply to it. The word exploratory popped into my mind.
Mm-hmm. Can you say more about how exploratory would apply to that?
Well, to me, I also was trying to remember what things we had discussed last week, because I might have I think I might have had another conversation like with a client or somebody that I'm getting mixed up. of what they were
Audience,
saying.
flow state, artist,
well,
creative,
Yeah, we'll figure it
all
out
the
as we
things.
go along.
Okay. There's-
Because I think one of the things that we talked about was that there's effectively two different, depending on what you're trying to do, there's two different like optimal ways to approach it. And one is if you have something you're aiming at, like you know what it is you're trying to accomplish, then you want to like think about it some first.
Mhm.
And if you don't, then it's just about trying something and doing the process that you're talking about. In either case, like as soon as you start making it, you can design whatever you want in your head, but as soon as you start like actually doing stuff, then you're getting feedback, you're getting data from the experience, and it's going to change and adjust as you go along.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's why the word exploratory. I didn't mean to imply that I think that's the right word for it or anything. That's just the first word that popped into my head for what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That you're just kind of figuring things out as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
Another way that I've talked about this difference, not just with art but with stuff generally, is I'll say there's two different ways to take a trip. One is you can kind of like think about all the possible destinations you could go to and select which one you most want to go to, and then kind of reverse engineer from there a plan that gets you there. Like, I want to go to Paris. Well, that means I'm going to have to fly into that airport, and so.
Mhm.
And the advantage of doing it that way is that you have total control over where you end up, or at least maximum control possible over where you end up. The disadvantage of doing it that way is that you can only go places that other people have already gone, because otherwise you wouldn't know about it as a potential destination. And that there are going to be many steps along the way where you're doing things that you would not otherwise want to be doing. Like, you don't want to sit in an airplane for 12 hours or whatever, but if you're trying to go to Paris, you just have to do that to get there, right? And the other way of doing it is to just start where you're standing and look around and say, of everything I can see right now, this is the thing that looks most interesting to me, and start walking in that direction. And as you're moving, you get new angles and perspectives, and you see new things, and some things get cut off. And at any given moment, you might say, oh, well, that now looks more interesting, and I'm going to change. So the advantage of doing it that way is that you are in each moment doing the thing that of all the things you could be doing is the thing you most want to be doing. And that you can discover things that no one else, including yourself, has ever discovered before. The disadvantage is that you have no control over where you end up. And it's quite possible that you end up at a place that isn't nearly as cool as you could have ended up if you had done something else. And of course, it's not that binary. You don't do one or the other, but those are just kind of the extremes to try to help clarify for people when it's better to think about what you're trying to do and plan it before you start.
And I think part of being trained in opera too, like I associated the creative process with the Paris trip. Like the outcome has to be this. It's been done many times before. This is the ways you could maybe be a little bit unique about it, but you have to check all of these boxes and jump through all these hoops to then do it. So I think that the like being outside of your house and saying, oh, that tree would be nice to walk closer towards, and oh, that for some reason it like didn't really occur to me as a thing.
Well, you've been doing it, so that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also, to continue out the metaphor, it's a more, you don't really do long-term things that way. Like you can only look at where you can get to. So it's about engaging in that process, doing what you can do right then and there, not so much about where do I want to end up at the end of all of this.
Yeah, and I think I have some clients who get stuck there, and I definitely get stuck as some version of, if I can't determine whatever the outcome is going to be, and it's an outcome that I want, then I just shouldn't do it at all. Which is literally never true. I think there are times in which it feels more true than other times. It's never true.
Yeah, I mean,
accurate?
It's not especially when there's risk involved. Like there are times where it's going to be better to say, like, you know what, without more certainty than what I have right now, I'm just not going to take the risk at all.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when safety concerns get involved, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't usually happen when we're talking about art, creating
Sometimes
art, but sometimes it does.
Yeah.
And when I say safety, I mean like physical safety, not
Yeah.
emotional feelings of safety and vulnerability.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of what thinking is for, right? Like
Mhm.
why we as human beings are even capable of cognition is to be able to consider what we might do and how it might work out before we do anything.
Mhm.
And if we come to the conclusion that it's going to go poorly, we don't do the thing. And sometimes if we come to no conclusion where we can't like eliminate or minimize the risk past a certain point, we don't do the thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, it gets over applied for sure, especially in the artistic process. You
Would you
can't.
say that that's more common in people who identify as neurodivergent versus the general population?
I definitely think so. Very, very much more common. People who identify as neurodivergent don't tend to be people who are very comfortable with like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this will go. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to do it anyway. It's not that we don't do that, but it's also, it correlates to how much you think about something, right? That whether you identify as neurodivergent or not, if you think about a potential course of action a lot, the more you think about it, the higher the bar gets for when you're going to transition into actually doing something about it.
Mhm.
You know, there's all kinds of common sayings and advice about like, don't think about it, just do it, just jump in, don't worry,
Mhm.
you're getting in your head, don't overthink this, that kind of stuff.
This stream was sponsored by Nike. Just kidding.
I was talking with one of our staff therapists just a couple hours ago about when it comes to solving a problem, and creating art is a particular subset of this, right? Like the problem in that case is that there's something that doesn't exist that you want to make exist. But
Mhm.
when it comes to solving a problem, you need to know what to do and do it. There are two different elements of solving a problem. Any problem that involves like physical reality anyway. There are problems that are only in our heads, our own emotional experiences and whatever, where we can make some changes just by thinking. But otherwise you have to know what to do and you have to do it. And people who identify as neurodivergent tend to, I don't know that this is like overall frequency, but they tend to focus more or notice or remember. We tend to notice more about the times where we're thinking and have come up with the idea of what to do, but haven't done it or are struggling to do it.
Yeah.
Then we go on the other side where people are able to or ready to do it, but they don't know what to do. Sometimes you don't do anything because you don't know what to do. Sometimes you do something because you think you know what to do. It turns out you were wrong and it doesn't work out. Sometimes you don't know what to do, but you just try something anyway, But both things happen to everybody.
Yeah.
What, you seem like you're...
I'm thinking about a bunch of stuff that I want to talk to you about outside of the stream.
Oh.
Here's a list.
All right, fair enough. None of it's stuff you want to say now on the stream?
Well, this is a complete pivot, but I do think it would help me so much to discuss this with both of you. I am so uncomfortable with my feelings of jealousy towards other people, and I would love like some sort of paradigm, some sort of framework to just have it be more chill.
I'm happy to talk about it. Do you mind if I ask? I mean, of course, don't answer anything you don't want to answer.
Yeah, just start asking. I'm just curious.
Well, like, what are the feelings of jealousy that you're referring to?
Usually it's some version of there's a finite resource and the resource is being distributed to someone who is not me. Other times it's like this person has a quality or a skill that I don't have. And then other times it's like I find myself similar to this person and they have a much higher level of success than I do. And I used to not really track ever feeling jealous. So yeah, I would love to
Well, so those are the circumstances in which those feelings of jealousy arise. What are the feelings? What is it that's happening? You're thinking like, oh, screw that person, they don't deserve what they have. You're thinking, oh, they're so great and I'm so like, what is it that's coming up when you're? Because there's no.
Usually it's like why couldn't I figure out how to play the chess game that well? So it's kind of like a more of an analytical autistic component.
All right,
Sorry, let's skip the word autistic.
No,
it's
fine.
more of an analytical component, like, oh, I've thought so much about how to play this chess game, and they've kind of found a way to play it, and like, oh, if I could have only figured it out that quickly. Because I really...
If when you're thinking about that, you ever come to the conclusion of like, oh no, there are circumstances which were true for them that are not true for me, and there's nothing I could have done.
I always skip that.
But if that does
okay.
Do you then feel better? Like when you come to some analytical conclusion of...
No, usually then I just feel kind of sorry for myself and I get sad.
Okay. Well, here's a kind of fun but super pedantic thing.
Okay.
Technically, jealous is the term used for when you possess something that you don't want others to take from you.
Envy?
And envy is the term for when others possess something that you would like to have. And the only reason I'm putting that out there, because it is pedantic and it doesn't matter, everybody knows what we mean when we say jealousy, but it's a way to change the language, right? That if, especially for you, because I know you care a lot about like the technical meaning of words and grammar and things, if we can insert this step of every time you're thinking about this or feeling something about it, there's this little nagging reminder of like, right, envy, then that starts a shift. Now it's different and we can do things differently moving forward.
Well, so when I do that without using the word envy, I usually think, okay, what does this person have that I want and how can I make this happen in my life?
Yeah, which is what you would want to happen.
But the one example I'm thinking of that I don't want to share on the stream is something that is finite, that only happened once, that didn't happen with me, and is happening with another person.
Well, so in this case, so finite is not the important thing here. It's whether it's a zero-sum game, meaning...
Tell me more, Brandon.
Well, like, the amount of oxygen in the air is finite. There's a limit to it, but me breathing it isn't taking away from what you could be breathing.
How?
Because there is enough. You know, it's surface. You don't need more than you have, right? Like, there's a limit on how much we can all be breathing. And so a zero-sum game is referring to if one person gets more, then someone else or other elements involved get less. That every gain has to be offset by a loss.
Yeah, and my brain has definitely been, or my mind has definitely been trained to view things that way.
Okay, sometimes it's not accurate, but sometimes it is, and it's worth thinking about that. But yeah, finite, like there's finite money in the world, but someone you know of making more money doesn't mean you have to make less, or that anyone even has to make less, because there are...
You can keep printing bills.
Well, there are things that are finite, and yet as like more of it can be created, right? Like,
yeah.
In fact, there are sometimes things where the more of it that somebody's getting, the more of it there comes to be for everybody.
Yeah.
That's what the phrase "a rising tide floats all boats" is referring to. And the therapy industry is a good example of that, where it's like if some therapist is doing very well, you know, becomes widely known or very successful or whatever, that's good for the entire industry, right?
Yeah.
Or neurodiversity is one of those things where some neurodiversity advocates do think of it like it's a zero-sum game, like somebody else becoming more well-known for neurodiversity is a missed opportunity for them. But the truth is that we have not reached anywhere near the full capacity, you know,
Not
like
even
saturation. Close. There are so many people who have not heard of anything about this.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I've talked, it's been a while, but I've talked about this on a stream in the past about like, I'm not jealously guarding any of my stuff. I'm giving it all away.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody took things that they heard from me or learned from me and went and wrote a book and became very successful, I'm all right with that. That doesn't bother me because that's not going to hurt me. If anything, it's like, oh yeah, more people are interested in the kind of stuff that I'm talking about now. You know, there's more of a opportunity for me. Anyway, we're getting a little away from the specific thing you started with. I don't know what you're referring to, but sometimes it is a zero-sum game. Sometimes it isn't. Is this one of those cases where it is? Like the more that somebody else gets, the less you have? Like as someone else goes up, you go down?
No, it's not.
Okay. Because you were saying earlier, like before that, you said that you'll look and say, well, how can I have, they have something, they've accomplished something or acquired something that I want. How can I get it? That's great. That's inevitable. Like we do that all the time. And B, it's what's supposed to happen to learn from other people who have done things and accomplished things, whatever that you also want. You want to learn from them.
Some place that I get to sometimes that also my clients will get to is some version of, oh, this person is successful. I want to be successful like them. How can I become more successful? And then like a couple hours later being like, I don't want that type of success. What am I doing? What am I talking about? And that happens to me sometimes. I'll get caught up in like, I could try to give an example on the stream.
You can if you want. I think I have a sense of what you're saying, but go ahead.
So there's this opera singer who is absolutely fantastic. I love her so much. I'm not going to name her name, but we were kind of at a similar place in our career at one point and blah, 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 blah. And so I was observing her career from afar, and like part of me was kind of like applauding her. And then another part of me was like, oh, if I would have made those different choices. And then another part of me was like, wait, I don't want to do any of that. Like I don't want it specifically for myself. I think I want some things that overlap with her. So now that I'm saying it, I think there is more commonality than I thought. But I was like, I don't want this. So then I get confused because I'm like, is that a previous part of me that wants it, but I don't want it anymore? Is this like mourning my previous self? Like, I don't know. That psychology buzzword.
Well, I was going to say that, in fact, you said a bunch of the stuff I was starting to think. Because that does sound to me, well, first of all, the solution or whatever, the thing that I would suggest is worth doing here is about general to specific stuff. You know, that you want to look at things, like break them down into component elements and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But then at the end there, you're starting to get into, as you identified, a great example of how a lot of psychological concepts and like psychological analysis gets in the way.
Absolutely.
Because you're just analyzing like, what is it about me that makes me do this thing instead of what is it about the thing that might be worth exploring.
And then I'm aware now enough of the limit of the utility of those things that I'll try to go back more to like the practical observable elements of it.
Yeah. So in this case, success is a very general term.
It is.
And because of what success means, like everybody by definition, by the definition of what it means to have success or be successful, everybody wants more of that all the time.
What is the common definition of success?
Well, that's the thing. Success means to accomplish the thing that you are intending to accomplish or that is desirable to accomplish. That's why, by definition, you want success. The things that you want, if you succeed, you acquire and accomplish those things.
Yeah.
But yes, just in that concept, it's too broad to be meaningful because somebody else can be very, very successful, way more successful than me, and yet I don't want any of the things that they have that are part of their success, right? Mm-hmm. So then it's about breaking it down and looking at what are the elements, because there's an undercurrent of self-judgment to what you're talking about here.
Tell me more.
Well, at first you were judging yourself for being jealous. Like it's a bad thing. And then the switch to making that about envy instead of jealousy ameliorated, made that better a little bit.
A little bit.
But there was still like, well, I shouldn't be envious either.
Yeah.
That's why I was trying to talk about, of course, all you're talking about is seeing something that somebody else has or has done or whatever and saying, oh, that seems cool. Like, I think I would enjoy that. That's not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Are you wishing ill on these people? Do you want
Oh no,
harm?
absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, I would love to just like fly to Europe and give her a big hug and.
Great. So what's the problem other than you think you're not supposed to be feeling what you're feeling? You shouldn't be envious or jealous or whatever.
Okay, so then how do I apply whatever I see to?
Well, so that was a bit of a like sidetrack, backtrack, whatever.
Yeah.
You would not be feeling that if there was no element of it, to your perception at least, that seems desirable to you.
Yeah.
Like, you don't.
And I think what I do usually when I kind of think about this a lot is I usually find the things, well, I wouldn't want that pressure, I wouldn't want that restriction, or I wouldn't want to have that schedule, or like all that stuff, instead of like, oh, what about this seems like beautiful and freeing and exciting and artistic and empowering.
What you're doing is fine. It's a good strategy depending on what you're trying to if what you're, because you don't wish ill on these people, but the negative experience of feeling jealousy or envy or whatever for you is in part judging yourself for it, but in part it's also thinking less or feeling worse about your own life, circumstances, et cetera, right? That like, if I see somebody doing something that I hadn't even considered before that seems amazing, now I'm going to look at myself that I'm not doing it and feel worse than I used to feel about the fact that I'm not doing it because I didn't even know it was possible.
And then another level of it is now I'm going to feel even worse because I'm thinking about something that is such a privilege to experience anyway, that I'm spinning my wheels, and that makes me an even worse person.
See, well, that part's just back to the self-judgment, and like that's the same thing. The things that you think and the things that you feel, there are reasons for those things. They're not always accurate. They're not always useful. They're not always enjoyable. They can cause problems, but there are reasons for it. And you don't need to try to, you becoming angry or whatever, feeling some negative kind of a way about yourself as a response never makes that any better. It only makes it worse.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
This is a big thing in like mindfulness, right? That it's almost, I think of it almost as like a cheesy therapist-y thing to say like, oh, thanks for bringing that to my attention. You know, that like you feel jealous, and rather than think, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm so jealous. That you say, oh, thank you, jealousy, for making me aware of this thing. Right? That it doesn't mean I'm going to listen to you or that you're right or that I'll guide, but just to say, I just became aware of something. That's never a bad thing. So that stuff is we can have a more general conversation about whether we call it second order problems, second order problem, self-judgment, whatever. But yeah, in terms of when you see somebody having something that you also would want, there can be a negative experience of feeling worse about the fact that you don't currently have it. And in that case, what you were talking about is a great strategy to say like, actually, I wouldn't even want it because of this and because of that and whatever. Because now you don't feel as bad about the fact that you don't have it. If that's what you're trying to accomplish is, I don't want to feel as bad about not having the thing.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm trying to accomplish now, because I've been doing that for years, is some version of how can I take elements of myself that mirror them and use those elements in a way that brings me pleasure in the world.
Yeah, I would say that's backwards. Well, first of all, I want to clarify is there are going to be times where what you're trying to accomplish is feel less bad about something. And there are going to be times where what you're trying to accomplish is figure out what you want. Like it's not there was a period in my life where I was just feeling bad and that's what I was focused on. But now it's different circumstances. Depends on the thing and the person and whatever.
Yeah.
So just always trying to point out to evaluate what is it that's happening and what do you want to change, and then thinking about how to change it. And there are other ways, by the way, to like make yourself feel less intensely bad about not having a thing or whatever. But I'm just saying the thing you're doing is a fine one, so stop judging yourself for that. Now, what I mean by backwards is when you initially notice that other person and have some thought about wanting something, being jealous, envious, whatever, that originates in something that they have, something that they've acquired or accomplished.
Correct.
Then the next step is where you might think, okay, well, what is it about them that enabled them or helped them to be able to get that thing?
Yeah.
And then the next step is that you're going to is, well, of those things that I just identified about them that helped them to get that thing, I have some or many or all of those things in common with them too. And then you're going into, well, so how do I then use those elements to get the thing? But what it should start with is, what is it that they have that you want? And that part you're skipping a little bit, at least in some of the ways you're describing this, where it just gets answered as, well, they have success or acclaim or some large scale, very generic thing. And before trying to figure out how to get the thing that they have that you think you have some things in common, the way you're approaching it is more like, well, because I have some things in common with someone who's very successful, therefore I should be successful, and I'm doing it in the same way they are, and I'm doing something wrong for not being that successful. How did I mess this up? And that's backwards. There are things that you have that they don't have.
Oh, I hate sentences like that.
Well, it doesn't. What's that?
What?
Why?
Yeah.
Because I feel like, I don't think Brandon is implying this, but I feel like often when people ask that question, they're like, well, let me prove to you that you're special too.
Okay.
Kind of like and then it becomes like what Pokemon cards do you have? And what Pokemon cards do I have? And your Pokemon cards are better than my Pokemon cards. And I fucking hate I hate my Pokemon cards.
Why do you have them?
I don't know. I'm gonna trade them in.
Well, you can do that. It is a trading card. You just have to find other people who want them.
This is like my one cultural reference, Brandon. Let me have it.
No, I like it. I'm running with your thing, even though we're going to back up into
the Brandon thing. Yeah.
But yes, that response, first of all, obviously, special is it's like unique, right? Like it's you either are or you are not, and every single person is. It's not a thing that needs to be proven.
Exactly.
So what you meant, I think, when you said it's like trying to prove that I'm special too, is it's like trying to prove that you are equally valuable or have accomplished an equal amount of things or equally successful as that other person. And yes, that is often what people are trying to do, and that's silly.
Feels like a participation medal.
Yeah, but also sometimes it feels invalidating because it's like, oh, well, you're doing these things that some people would consider success, and so you should just like feel okay and continue doing what you're doing. When I'm like, no, there's actually an element in what they're doing that I think could help me feel better.
Yeah.
See, that's where I think you're getting mixed up again. You're skipping. There's something they have that you want.
Yeah, I'm tracking that. I'm just not saying it out loud.
Well, you said there's something they're doing that could make me feel better, and that's I think part of where you're getting tripped up.
Yeah, they have something that I want.
Yeah. Now, when I said you have things they don't have, I don't mean just good things that they would also want, that they would be jealous of you.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people in my life, when they ask me that question, mean, though.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
quite frequently.
Which is so annoying.
Yeah, that's often what people mean. Kind of like when people will say everything happens for a reason, what they often mean is, like, don't worry, things will work out well in the end, or you shouldn't feel as bad about this as you do, or things like that. But the statement, everything happens for reasons, is still a true statement, right? Anyway, sometimes the thing you have that another person doesn't have is $100,000 of student loan debt. Sometimes the things you have that someone else doesn't have is cancer. It's not like always good things, but it is true that there are things in your life that are not in theirs.
Absolutely.
And some of those things might be things that they wish that they had, sure, or other people would wish that they had. Some of them might be things that even if that other person wouldn't care about it, you would, like something that would be relevant for me or people like me when comparing ourselves to, like, I studied acting, I was an actor. If I'm going to compare myself to successful actors my age, many of those actors do not have, 3 children like I have, or a therapy practice, or whatever.
Or like never stressed out.
I get
Sometimes, like once a year.
No, someday I'll write a book maybe about recovering from burnout, because I feel like I am pretty much almost all the way recovered from burnout.
That's a really good point. I'm sorry.
I would like to read that, please. As soon as you write it.
I'll write a book and I will pester you until it's done.
Yes, I mean,
even though art is iterative.
Heading into and then coming out of the lowest point of my burnout, which was fall of 2022, I was pretty much nonstop stressed for a couple of years there.
Yeah.
But outside of that window of heading into that burnout and coming out of it, I'm generally not a super stressed person. Anyway, what I'm talking about, we've talked about it before, opportunity cost. That you have finite resources, and some of those resources are zero sum, right? That to spend some on this means that there's something else you're not spending it on.
Correct.
Which is why I'm saying coming at it from figuring out what it is that they're doing, or what it is that because you're similar in certain ways that you should have done or should be doing or whatever is backwards, because you can't evaluate for all of the things that you're doing that they are not, or all of the things which have been true in their lives and not in yours. And it's not the point. The point of this is not to figure out how to replicate their success, because that's impossible.
And also, particularly, I don't want their success.
Sure, but even if you did, the more you go down that path of trying to replicate it, the worse you'll feel, because it cannot be done. You can't do all the things they did in the circumstances in which they did.
And also,
things.
this person was like a prodigy too, so it's like from age.
Well, now
like
you're getting into
14.
evaluating characteristics again. That's
is prodigy a character? Oh, I guess it is.
Yes,
That's
and it's
so
also a label that is
interesting.
applied after they did all those things, and therefore are a prodigy, not they are a prodigy and therefore did all those things.
Yeah, they're just autistic and offers their special interest.
I mean, that might be true, but it's not the point of what I'm saying. I'm just trying to point out you're getting it backwards. You think of it as because of what a person is, that's why the things that happen, when it's what happens dictates how we would label a person. It's not that a person becomes successful because of some inherent qualities that they possess. Is that when we are evaluating someone that we deem to be successful, we're going to use language and focus on things that are through the lens of their success. And if we were doing it in a different way, you are doing, like people generally do for themselves, then you would be focusing on their shortcomings and the work that there is yet to be done and whatever. We were talking a little bit about this with art specifically last week. To me, this is a huge problem for artists. This idea that when you see somebody who has been successful in ways that you want to be, that you then assume that that's what they were aiming at, and that they figured out, because the lens that you're looking through is how do I get from where I am to where they are. And so there's an assumption, there's a bias in the way that cognition is working, where you're evaluating it as though they also knew that they wanted to be what they currently are.
Well, this person did, but
they can't in the way I'm talking about. They can't have the specific details, right? Like you can say, I want to be a successful opera singer. You can't say, I want to do this show in this place at this time under this director, when you don't know that those things even happen. You figure it out along the way, right? That it's not that Stephen King became successful because he knew that if someone was like what Stephen King currently is, they would be successful and therefore aimed at it and worked toward it. He just did what he was doing and became successful as he was doing it. It emphasizes, if you think of it that way, then it makes you do nothing, because you're like, well, this book isn't a Stephen King book, so I shouldn't put it out there yet.
Yeah.
But Stephen King put books out there before they were Stephen King books. You become the thing. Anyway. Opportunity cost matters. So first, when you're looking at something, honor that feeling of, call it envy, call it jealousy. I would recommend that you call it either of those things.
What shall I call it?
Desire.
Oh, I like that word.
That you just are seeing something that you desire.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different than if you were leafing through a fashion magazine and saw a piece of clothing. You're like, ooh, I want that. And is your response to that to be like, oh no, what's wrong with me? Why do I want this thing just because I saw someone else have it or thought about, like that's how it works. You get exposed to things, you think about things, you evaluate those things. Some of them you want, some of you don't. But then delve into it more deeply before going down that other stuff. Think, okay, there's definitely a reason I'm feeling this desire. There's something there that looks to me to be appealing. And we're flawed and limited, and sometimes later on you'll realize, like, nope, I was just mistaking that. I perceived it in a certain way or didn't think about other element or whatever. But that's fine. It's still how it starts. There's something about that that's appealing to me. And break it down and figure out what is the thing that is appealing to you before doing anything else. So that other step that you do sometimes, that I said, is a good thing to do depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Of saying, well, here's elements of their experience that I don't want. Here are things that they have or have done that I don't want to do or have done. Cool. But there's still something you are observing there, or at least that you think you're observing there, or whatever, that you do want. Let's figure that out. And then where to go from there doesn't really differ from any other version of this is a particular way of discovering something you're aiming at. There are many ways to come up with an idea of what you're aiming at. But once you have the idea of what you're aiming at, it's no different than anything else. What?
So putting together so many puzzle pieces in my head.
Oh. Anything you want to say?
I'm curious what Marie's thinking.
This is very relatable to me. For me, I harbored this desire to write, to be a writer, and I talk to writers a lot, and I work alongside writers, and I'm like, why am I not a writer? And then I think about, well, how much writing am I actually doing versus how much writing the writers are doing?
Great. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so sometimes when those feelings of envy or whatever come up, I just kind of check myself and ask, well, what am I doing to get there?
And now you're judging yourself for feeling that.
No, it's not a judgment, because I think about what resources do I have versus what resources other people have in terms of time and energy, and then I stop kicking my own ass for not writing.
Which is good. But you start with the self-judgment and then have to go through that process that you just said in order to get yourself to stop judging yourself. Which is good. And all of that is taking resources that could otherwise be spent on writing. There's a I think it's Emily Dickinson quote that I like. Could be Angie Dickinson. I get them confused, but I think it's Emily Dickinson. That she said, to write is 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 to write. There is no secret. The there is no secret part is not part of the quote. That was the end of the quote. But yeah, you just got to do it.
Yeah. I think where I get blocked too is what we were talking about last week, putting yourself out there in front of an audience.
Yeah. And I mean, I am deliberately keeping us out of the analytical side of this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I do that.
Because it doesn't really, yes, you can do analysis that says, well, this is why those people had success that you aren't having, so that you feel better about it. Which, cool, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but it's not helping you to get more things that you want. It's a strategy to make you feel less bad about not having the thing that you want. And there's validity to it. Among many other things that are involved in, for example, being willing and able to put yourself out there in front of people, is how shielded you are from the negative repercussions of people not liking you.
Mm.
You know, that if I'm in a position where, for various reasons, because I'm a man or because I'm wealthy or because of whatever, very like, where if I do something and people don't like it, then it's still not very risky for me to like, oh well, I'll be okay.
Mhm.
But if I'm very vulnerable and if I do something that people don't like, they're gonna murder me, you know, like then I'm not gonna be quite so comfortable.
Yeah.
So the only like significant difference, that's not even a difference, but the only thing that is true of all contexts that we're talking about where you have envy or whatever, that isn't necessarily true of other times that you come up with something that you are aiming at or desiring, is that you know of somebody else who has accomplished it. So the only other thing that we can definitively state is, yeah, evaluate what it is that they might have done that might have helped them to be able to, among other ways of looking at what you could do. That's one way of looking at it. Will you be able to do everything that they did? No, there's differences. Even if you do everything that they did, will it work out the same for you? No, it could, but it's not a guarantee to. But it's better than no information, right? Like, how do I get to, I don't know, whatever. How do I get to theoretical point X? Well, if I know somebody who's there, I have some data I can get from their journey there. Whereas if I say, how do I get to theoretical point X? And as far as I know, no one's ever gotten there, I have no data to pull from.
Do you think that, I don't know how to put this thought into words. I'm not talking about the person I've been talking about on this stream now, but theoretical person who is successful, I feel envy, I want something that they have. Is it reasonable if I'm in like contact with them to say, how did you get there or something? Because I feel like I've gained valuable insights about various industries when talking to people who are traditionally successful in those industries, and not with the idea of, oh, if I do the exact same things they did, I'll get the same success. But like, I don't know, some kind of shortcuts.
I think it is very reasonable to ask questions like that. And as with anything, that doesn't mean that like any given context, it's going to work out well for you. You know, the other person might think of it as inappropriate or whatever. But yes, it's very reasonable to ask people about, like, generally speaking, people like to talk about their journeys, you know, like what it is that they have done. That people, generally speaking, like to be helpful and like to answer questions of people who are showing interest in them.
Yeah.
If you're going to do that, my recommendation would be, and this is, you know, as somebody who has some, not a lot, but sometimes have been asked by people, you know, oh, I'm thinking about going into this field, or my friend or my child's thinking about going into this field. Like, how did you get where you are, whatever. My recommendation is be as specific in your questions as possible. Because asking someone like, what did you do to get where you're at, is a question that can be answered all kinds of ways. It's a very general question, so it can get very general and useless answers like, well, I just kept plugging away or whatever, you know, like that is an answer to the question but doesn't convey meaningful information. It can get specific answers where someone says, well, I studied here and then I did this thing and then, you know, I worked 3 hours a day on this and whatever. But they're just kind of throwing out whatever they find to be most impactful and worth sharing. And so you being more specific is more helpful.
We have 7 minutes until 2.
Cool.
I think you have a 2.
I do. And
which I have no feelings about.
That seems untrue, but
it is untrue.
Seems like one of those things that the very nature of saying it makes it untrue.
That's why I did it on purpose. But anyway.
I just want to interrupt and say hi to Coach Fritz.
Coach Fritz, I can't.
On the subject earlier of not guarding your work and giving it away freely, Fritz says giving away is akin to a flowing stream. More flows in. I really like that.
Yeah, I like that too. I mean, really, I can describe it in different ways. Well, okay. Here's something. Marie, you were talking earlier about sometimes getting jealous or envious or whatever of other writers.
Other writer, yeah, well, of
If
writers, not other writers, because I'm not a writer.
well,
I think you are a writer.
I'm operating under a time
Oh.
limit, so we're not going to talk about that right now. But that's what
Okay.
I'm talking about, and I does come up with artists a lot. Anyway, we were talking about these feelings toward other writers. Uh, something that I've said, I've been trying to say a lot more lately is if you judge or evaluate other people in certain ways, then you do the same to yourself,
Yeah.
and vice versa. If you judge or evaluate yourself in certain ways, then you do the same to others.
Mm-hmm.
If you evaluate whether people are good people or bad people, then definitely you are worried that you might be a bad person. Otherwise, what would be the point? You know. So same here. If you are, and I'm not saying this is what you were saying, but just as a jumping off point, right? That if you are somebody who is looking at other people who have success in a field and feeling jealous or angry or, well, they don't even deserve it or whatever, then I bet good money that part of what's getting in your way is that when you think about creating what you want to create or when you think about being successful, you worry that other people will think that you don't deserve it. That other people will say, oh, well, she only got there because whatever. And now you're trying to address that concern. How do I become successful in such a way that makes it so that people don't think this thing about me? Which doesn't make it impossible, but definitely makes it harder. And you're spending resources on things that aren't necessary. So that's part of the whole, like, giving away whatever. Like, if you're walking around jealously guarding your secrets, then that's kind of the opposite of putting your stuff in front of people, for one. But it also means that you're operating as though other people are doing the same to you, that they also have their secrets that they're guarding from you. You start to think of everyone as like holding out on you because you're holding out on them.
Yeah. Which has not been my experience talking to writers. They're normally very generous with their ideas and their thoughts.
Kind of by definition, any artist,
Yeah.
as we were talking about last week, art is communication. Like, artists want to do things that other people observe. Generally speaking, yeah, they're happy to talk about what it is they're doing.
It's about connecting with people.
Yeah. And they don't always understand. I mean, we often don't understand what we're doing or what elements are the important elements. Like, it's not like every answer we have to everything is the best answer, but generally people are trying to talk about what they do. Like, read any random interview with a successful artist, and there's probably stuff in there about what they believe people can do to be more successful or happier or whatever.
Thanks for coming to the stream, everyone. See you next week.
We have a few minutes.
I know I'm trying to change the pattern.
Oh.
Because usually when I say that, it's 2 or 2:05, and then it's 2:10 or 2:05 when we end. So I'm trying to reverse engineer.
Well, I wanted to make this other comment about the whole giving away, the more you give, the more you get kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Counter to what people will often talk about in terms of being a people pleaser and whatever. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, the more that other people like you, the better off you are.
Absolutely.
So the more you make people happy or please them, the more they, generally speaking, want to do things that make you happy and please you. The more you help people, the more they, generally speaking, help you. So that's another part of this, what we're saying philosophically in terms of, like, if you give things away, you'll get more, like, it doesn't make it less or whatever. It's partly just that. The more you engage with with other people, the more you interact and help out, and, like, the more they will do the same. And the thing that correlates to success, if we're talking about success broadly, there's only one thing that correlates to it, and it is access to resources. All that other stuff, anything else people want to identify is not a, like, strong, valid, one-directional correlation. Access to resources. There are many different ways to get access to resources, including, of course, being born with lots of money, et cetera, things that you know about. But other people have resources, right? That you get access to more resources as more other people become involved or willing to help support you or whatever.
Yeah.
If you don't have $1 million, you can still raise $1 million from 1 million different people donating $1.
Mhm.
So yes, the nicer, the more generous, the more open and whatever that you are with people, generally the better off you're going to be doing over time.
Mhm.
There are specific exceptions to that rule. Obviously, there are people who will take advantage of you being nice and abuse you and make things worse for you. But the whole reason that we spend so much time talking about things like that, situations like that, is because they are the rare exception.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like the only reason that someone who is abusing you or who's treating you poorly can even do that is because most people don't. If most people did, then none of us would operate in such a way that allows it to happen anymore. What happens is that there's one person or a couple people over the course of, who take advantage of the fact that everybody else responds to being helped by being helpful in return to keep getting you to help them over and over, even though they're not doing anything in return for you.
Mhm.
So it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It does mean it's the rare exception. And even in the life of somebody who could say, I've been in a bunch of abusive relationships, it's still if you talk about all the people they've ever interacted with, how many of them abused them, took advantage of them, whatever, it's still a very small percentage.
Mhm.
So it's not to say act as though it will never happen. It's just to say, generally speaking, the more you share with others, the more they share with you. I can be done now.
Yeah.
On time.
That's to end it on time. Yeah. Thank you both. This has been really fun, interesting. Thank you, Caitlin. I guess you made yourself quite vulnerable to ask that question.
Yeah, it's this is not therapy, but Brandon does therapy on Caitlin. No, I really enjoyed it. I did that in a
I
good way.
enjoyed it too, and I
Yeah.
appreciate it. It was not me doing therapy on you, though. I just
No.
want to be clear about that.
For also very many reasons.
Yeah, by therapy, I mean, thanks, Brandon, for a wonderful conversation.
Sure. Yeah,
There we go.
being helpful.
I remember
others,
this is on the internet. Yeah.
Well, I don't just mean it in that
Forever.
really. I mean that if we don't have time, but if we did, you and I have, and you would very quickly identify elements of a therapeutic interaction that are not present here.
Yeah.
But kind of like on theme with what we're talking about, right? That there can be elements of things which are similar or the same without the two things being similar or the same.
Yeah.
That yes, there are.
This is a rectangle and therapy is a square. Correct. Is there many more rectangles that are
What you're talking about? What you're talking about is subset. Squares are a subset of a rectangle.
Yeah.
All squares are rectangles.
Yeah.
This is two distinct things that share. This would be like a polygon and a square. They both have straight lines and vertices, but different amounts and different angles.
Okay.
We should talk logic stuff. All right. Good to be with you all. I see there was a comment there that I don't know how to answer. Can I imagine if Ninja got a low taper fade? I know who Ninja is, and I know what a low taper fade is. I'm sorry, I do not have more to say about that.
Yeah. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Take care, everybody. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
You're the one who turns it off.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I always forget. Bye, all. See you next week.